Hi, everybody. Just trying to get myself settled here. Okay. Um, we have a few questions, but they're really basically old questions that you may or may not have heard last webcast. So I'm going to try this one again. Uh, this is Ian Rimmer's question. If we have tremendous flow in previous lives, why can't we remember it in this life? And how does being vulnerable speed up our growth? Whoa, that'll take a couple of webcasts, maybe not. This is an interesting question, probably not for the reasons why it was asked, but the first part of the question, why can't we remember tremendous flow in previous lives? I think there's probably an extremely good reason if you look at the overall engagement that we've had with lives. One principle, one way of looking at it is that you consider all of the lives that you've ever lived, no matter what lives they were, it just doesn't matter. You consider the possibility that there are many, and they're all related to one basic principle. And the basic principle, I guess, is probably important to talk about first, and that is ultimately to create a form, a personality form. I know some of you won't like the way I say this, but an energy form. We just happen to call it personality. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a personality. It's a form through which energy can manifest on these levels. Energy from a higher state, first of all, and energy flowing through the dimensions that we are a part of in this state, which is physical, emotional, and theoretically mental. So how would you ever construct this form in your mind to make sense of an answer? Well, let's try and do that somewhat by allowing yourself to consider the possibility that you are a form currently, an energetic form that has some capacity to be conscious, usually focused with respect to how you see others and how you engage with yourself and how you relate to others with the form that you use. Whether you're considering that form as a personality or an identity, whether you're looking at life as trying to create a tool, personality, through education, through understanding how others are or could be or would be or not, or how they are not. But you will perceive through the system that you have, and that's your perceiving form. You believe it's more correct and important than perhaps other forms. Now, you won't feel that way all the time, but you will feel that from time to time because it's the form through which you are reading. It's a pair of these things, a pair of glasses that you are looking through to see others, to see yourself. And you are biased about what you come up with, and that's legitimate because everyone else is biased as well. And so now what we have to do is try and understand that you've got to be this kind of form, the way you are now, for a particular purpose. And that purpose is to learn how to be consciously aware of other states, higher states. You've learned how to be aware of the physical state to some degree, the emotional states to some degree, and one would say some mental states to some degree. And that cohesive mix you call person, something that relates to the personal or personality. And your relationship with that is pretty well stopped right there. If you've even reached that particular point where you're willing to consider a philosophical view of what an individual might look like. There is no real negativity in coming up with any answer, actually. Whatever answer you come up with, that's where you are right now. Well, let's try and just let that be for a second. And now consider the possibility of how you really could have gotten there. And one possibility is, remember, it's energy related, so I'm going to do it from an energy point of view. Throughout various manifestations in these planes, you have constructed form based on what other forms have been like. Your parental background, aunts, uncles, teachers, doesn't matter, friends. And also with what you come up with, your particular version of what seems to be the only way to think, reflexively, often, or think inadvertently, somewhat mentally, logically, if you can, and to spend some time thinking. Well, this is one of those times. Let's spend some time thinking. I'm going to ask you to do one kind of a crazy little funny thing. Consider yourself as a team of beingnesses, of forms, that are energy related. Now, these forms have over time been able to handle certain frequencies to some degree through some of these valves or chakras, you could call them. And in certain periods of existence, you have become over 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever numbers of existence that might occur in a small little grouping that might relate to 1 or 2 or 3 frequencies. You have become capable to some degree to engage with society, relate to others, relate to yourself, and come up with some sort of idea about what your environment is like, how you should be a part of it, what part you play in it, and not always being focused on the negative aspects, but focused on a constructive element. The element meaning, because you're looking at it from this point of view, meaning you're a form in construction throughout all your lives for a particular purpose that may occur at some time. Not necessarily this time, not necessarily last time. Could be a number of times you've come close to being such a being, but only a being that can handle energy here, but only in certain frequencies. And there may be a possible goal that you can handle a number of frequencies because there are a number of frequencies that lie within the whole of our species. And you're species oriented. So you are now looking in your mind's eye and you're seeing various numbers. I don't care how many you want to come up with. Many people come up with a number. How close that number is to reality is up for grabs. It could be true, it may not be true, and the numbers are optional from my perspective. The important thing is not the number. The important thing is the developmental process. So if you can handle, for example, certain amounts of capacity operating through, let's say, a root center or a base center, a will center, gonad center, which is part of the species propagation, of course, as you all know. But you can't handle some frequencies, but you can handle others. They pretty well dictate who you like and who you don't like. They include the emotional disposition, how you feel comfortable with other people, how you engage and can interact and discuss things that you don't have a clue about, and it doesn't matter, but you're discussing. It's as if you're talking to a frequency. You're not talking to a person. You are not limited by what you say, but you're expressing beyond refined or narrow, not necessarily refined, but narrow ways of engaging. I'm just going to move this a tiny bit. There we go. Now, in doing this, you come up with the idea that you notice something while you're talking, that you're feeling kind of broader or a bit glowy or a bit energetic or a bit tired. You're shifting states, you're moving into other states. And as we're doing this, I'm wondering whether you're considering the possibility that there may be links between some of these old clusters of lives that relate to frequency and trying to be comfortable with certain frequencies. Then what you're really basically doing is learning that there may be a purpose in your relationship with life that is beyond the purpose of a single life. And in that particular place of reference, you're considering the possibility that you are kind of a product of other, or a conglomerate relating to other kinds of frequencies, as well as the frequencies that you're using now. It seems like a little bit of a creative idea for you to allow yourself to consider such a thing, but allowing yourself to consider such a thing engages a kind of sense of being okay currently, because you could be dealing currently with new frequencies that you're not dealing well with. You could also be dealing with frequencies that you are more comfortable with because you've had a number of lives within these frequencies, and you are able to help the species or individuals through the expression of these frequencies in you, even though you're not paying much attention to them, or you can't even perceive them as a personality as you are currently. Just a second. If that's true, then there is an implication as energy beings that we are always transmitting. Yes, I would agree with that. I would think. Now, if you're always transmitting, then everyone is always transmitting. And you are learning every single day of your life how to engage with the energies that are currently occurring through you. Now, you'll do that verbally. Your verbal expression relates to, once again, a conglomeration of you, the physical, emotional, and mental system that has attempted to learn how to function through the personality that you believe is the kind of the apex of what is valuable from your perspective. It doesn't mean it is. It means from your perspective. It's the only perspective you can have until you engage deeper into other states and you begin to notice that there is a mix that's beyond, you can say another state, that is beyond the states you're normally used to, and slowly you can get used to them. Now, if you have been involved with other states previously, then it's possible that you can link up with old timelines, let's say, cores of energy within the centers that are appropriately engaged with those other timelines, and link up internally in a way that would be helpful to the current form, because somewhere there's a reminiscence or an old engagement that you can, let's say, handle better because you've been through it before. Some aspect of one of your centers or all of your centers has been through handling that particular flow going through you previously. Now, I'm sure you're all sitting back, looking out in your mind's eye, and noticing through time and through space that you've been in existence previously. And you're considering the possibility of a huge conglomerate also of interaction with life, various kinds of life. Does not only have to be the human form, it can be anything. And that you're considering the possibility of engaging with a particular timeline that might help you currently to handle more energy coming through you currently, or to handle better the energy that you are attempting to handle in this lifetime. However, remember, you're also set up to think the way you're thinking, to emote the way you emote, and to engage physically the way you do. And over a period of time, you get used to that way of engaging, and you decide that that's the way that you should engage because it's the one you know. So right now, after saying that, I'm sure you're sitting back and saying, how else can I engage with others and myself to soften down or to lift into a different way of engaging with life as a personality, and see if I can do that? Wow, you might say, that might be a monumental task, or you might say, oh my goodness, I never considered this idea before, and you begin slowly to realize that you play a very powerful or monumental part in your engagement with life every day. And probably you're saying to yourself, wow, so this is why living life in spiritual development with others is so important. So you can engage and you can watch yourself doing how you do things and begin to make small little changes about the slowest pace of a turtle that you can ever imagine, and slowly recognize bit by bit there are some changes occurring emotionally with respect to how you see things, how you're considering others to be, and also how you are watching your reactions taking place and softening them down when they don't need to be always right. And sometimes you'll notice they're very effectively valued by you, and they may even be helpful, and other times not so helpful. So you're watching the interplay between old lives and now, but you can't put figures on it. The year 1066, I was there at the Battle of Hastings doing this, and pick a decent person, good shot with the arrows or whatever. And in 643, I was doing this and that. And mine in BC 310, I was a student with Aristotle, whatever it may be. Could all be true, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that because you were there, you're anything special. It could even have been Aristotle or Plato or Socrates or any of the other really recognized and known people in our history books. But you may not have been that. You might have been just an ordinary, able being, not bringing up any focus on your personality and just helping humanity. Oh yeah, by the way, that is what an ultimate goal might be, possibly. And because as a being of that ilk, you wouldn't need to have any accolades, because you would know what was occurring and you could perceive those altered states or those other states. And you didn't have to get more accolades from anybody else to feel comfortable within you. That would definitely be a rare being, by the way. As you could probably understand why that might be. Now, we're still watching, though, those lines of reference that are coming from those points where you have been involved with other incarnations in various places, whether your gender would be sometimes male, sometimes female. Your attitude would sometimes be coarser because you're trying out a new frequency and a couple of frequencies that don't work together, so you need to cultivate a softer orientation and a recognition that you're nervous and afraid of those things coming in, and therefore you try to attempt to help you all the time just to survive. And higher states would know that. They would know that exactly. So therefore, when you react to others and they're in those states, you would know exactly that you're not at a really high state when you're doing that. That is okay, because you're at the state that you're in that second, in that moment. And you are working to try and be more able to handle more in, let's say, I was going to say intense, but let's say a stronger flow coming in at a frequency that you're not quite used to yet at that pitch, at that level of flow. So you are getting the idea then, perhaps, that you are working with energy, you are engaging energetically because you are an energy being, and you are learning how to modify and balance, look for balance in your personalized construct. In other words, how all of these structures come together in you as a person, whatever your name is. It doesn't make very much difference. Names aren't as important as we believe, but it's nice to have them so we can talk about, we can engage with people instead of saying, hey, you. Makes perfect sense. But the interesting thing about all of this is to recognize that you're a being that is in development, moving towards handling different levels of capacity that can be softened through you because you already know how to do that, and you can be trusted to soften down the best you can, because tremendous amounts of energy flowing through us would make us perhaps nervous, but also tend to intensify us in places where we're not yet as capable as we will be to handle these intensities or frequencies. So by now you're starting to realize that this may or may not be the last form that you're a part of in the creation of a form that can handle more and more frequencies for a purpose that would be really helpful to others in aiding them to become more able to handle frequencies that would be helpful to others. And if you just continue on there, you can see that the reason for this is it so more can be able to be of service in the long run to higher states, which have within them the purpose of being helpful to the lower states. And as you probably realize, we give those states names. They probably don't name themselves, because it doesn't seem to make any sense. Because our relationship with them is to begin to know that they are flowing through us and are a part of the structure, energetic structure, that we are in a process of becoming involved with more and more. That then one of the latter orientations that are so hard to deal with is that if we become involved with them, then our personalizations, our self-interest, our wanting to pedestalize everybody who has these kinds of capacities starts to chirp in. And every little increase in our capacity, we start to elevate the personalized form. Now, the personalized form is an old form. It didn't know how to look into the far distant past and begin to understand that the reason why we're engaged with various states is so that we can cultivate a form on these planes so that higher states could operate through and we would not interfere with them. The old form is it operates through, and therefore we are much more important than everybody else who doesn't have these things operating through them. That is a self-interested form, and it's a form that is younger, and it happens literally because it doesn't really understand the broader picture. And it can't understand the broader picture because it believes it has to take for its own a state that enables them to become of great value in the eyes of others. It needs the value in the eyes of others to enable them to feel good about themselves. And this is a state of nervousness and fear about not being good enough to be okay within yourself, to be of value, and then move on. Be of value again and again, and move on. And again, move on. To broaden the capacity that beings at this level of engagement can handle, and at the same time know for sure that their handling is a part of higher states. They are working within themselves to be able to find balance with higher states in the lower states so that the lower states can be infused with higher engagement and not necessarily think that makes them more superior to others who can't. Higher state beings don't think this way. High state interaction doesn't think this way. It just expresses for the purpose of being helpful to others. Not so far off from Buddhism, Hinduism, all is Christianity, Taoism. Able beings are there to help others to become more able. That's different than able beings being there so that you can make them more able with the numbers of people who really think they're able. That doesn't make any sense, really. It makes sense here. It's like adding 1 and 1 and 2 and 2. Very youthful stuff. But nonetheless, we have a language. We have a language that relates directly to where we are in our world. And this language has a big impact on us on these planes because it's our species language. And our species language elevates people, and therefore then they should be treated as more superior to other people. It's what we have learned, but it's not what might be helpful at higher states. Some of the people that I've been fortunate enough to meet, and very fortunate beyond my belief and my understanding, they are helping in our world with no one there to perceive them, because in our world perception is fairly low, because it's personalized, and their perceptions are broader. They engage with soul states. They perceive energy flowing in at different levels in another being for the purpose of attempting to help others to have the same thing happen. And that's where they help. They're helping at that soul level. I find that very fascinating personally, but here you are, I've left you hanging in a creative mind that's engaged with watching all of those manifestations that you have had in the past and how they've been in those places for the purpose of handling energies that are difficult, energies that are easy for you, based on how you have constructed yourself through time and space. So we've got to get back there. So when you're engaged with these particular kinds of noticings in your mind's eye, then you begin slowly to realize the things that you can do physically to help you are really important. Things that you can do emotionally to help you are very important. Things you can do mentally to help you are very important, because it broadens the beingness and these planes, relative to these planes, and based on these planes, so that you can have a broader perspective than you had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, five years, whatever it is, doesn't matter. No one's there to tell you what to do. You're there to understand the breadth of movement that you are capable of engaging with. If you have time to do these things, do them. If you have an engagement with these and find it difficult, don't miss the fact that you're having some difficulty with this stronger frequency coming in. Learn how to soften it down, gentle it down, and be respectful to you. And know, like everyone else on the planet, you're growing. No matter how able you believe you are, you're still growing. Nothing is negative there. It's not related to good, bad, right, or wrong. It's related to attempt. Do what you can. If you think you're failing at that, it's because you're afraid you're not doing the best you can. And in fact, the truth is you are doing the best you can, even though you don't think so. Now, this is really hard to remember. It's easy when you're giving a talk to remember that and generalize, but you're engaged in life, and you will know that you will believe you can do better or do more, perhaps. And if you don't think you can, well, you have options. And through your past experience, that past experience in this level, you're still a watcher of all of those manifestations, but on this level, they will affect you. So you will act out how others have acted out with you. Know that that may be true, and you know that it's okay for you not to do that. Just a bit. Soften them down, because they're reflexes, and you've learned from other people. And every single day of your life, you learn from other people. Wow, that's impressive. I thought I learned all this stuff, and then I only react, and then I'll react this way and that way, figure it all out, and now from here on in, I'm going to be a really decent personality. I'm going to do this and that. No, you still learn. You understand deeper, and you learn how to be okay with you. And you learn that you can step out of your comfort zone. Not all the time, but sometimes. And those sometimes will affect you. And it will affect the energy that comes into you. And if you dialogue with you, you will listen to you. And if you soften your relationship with you, you will also attempt to be okay with that. If you intensify it, and it gets you something, the smallest little thing, you will tend to intensify it again, because you'll think that that's how you get stuff. Just so you know, that was a jet passing over, and we're not being attacked. As far as I know. It's a football game. Anyway, so your relationship with you is wondrous. Life is precious, because every second of your engagement with life shifts and turns, and help can occur in the form that you're a part of in relationship to training, because we engage with ourselves every day. And that form is being moved slowly to begin to be conscious of the fact that there are other domains, other dimensions, other states, and you are able to engage with them for the purpose of helping others as well as yourself. And there was an old adage a long time ago, I'm not sure whether it was Taoist or not, to tell you the truth. As you help you, you can help others. And I often thought, wow, this is really helpful, although hard to do, because we engage in a manner that's fairly often fixed, because we somehow protect something that kind of helps us to be the person that we are under the conditions that we engage with in our repertoire of life. This is not a negative thing. This is how we all are. And then it gets to be pitting one repertoire against another repertoire, this kind of thing. And all we are doing is stiffening up and devaluing a higher state. Because the state is never the same as what we think it is from these levels. It is as it is at other state levels. And we are attempting to understand it through our personalized languages, whatever they may be, relating to spiritual growth, for example, because that's what we are attempting to understand the best we can. So when you're dealing with growing, often there's a reflex that occurs in us that is akin to our personalized survival, the way we normally have been. We protect the past all the time, unknowingly, of course. And so what we do is we engage with what we believe you have to be a spiritual person. Let that sink in for a second. And in fact, what we have to be is personally honest with ourselves the best we can. Find a balance someplace. Find a middle ground someplace where you can look at how you function. It's like looking like we are still looking at all those many lives. They're coming over to various centers and creating form through which energy passes through and stimulates that form as it passes through, like a bit of a wind that stimulates the trees, the leaves on a tree, as it flows through. Now, we are learning how to see the wind and how it stimulates the trees, the leaves, in the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. They're getting a little closer to the house. We're beginning to wonder now. No, just kidding. So, I think I've covered that question a little bit, and now you can start coming back to the form that you believe you are, and recognize that sometimes you are a very able being because you can handle energy, and it was focused in a particular area or place, and you used it to do the best you could in the world. Other times you were warriors and educators and thinkers and garbage pickers and serfs and all kinds of different things, males and females and question marks. All of these things are just part of our creative system, and we're trying to learn how to understand this in a broader manner. So I think I've covered universal being, creation of a form to handle large amounts of energy from spiritual higher states, and a pathway, a whole pathway through lives, where you are learning through life how to handle and engage with, in whatever particular timeline you happen to be in, different ways of being different things, so that ultimately you have experience in many, many areas, but you just don't remember what they are. But it doesn't mean you don't engage with how they were. From time to time, they creep into your day speak, your day thought, your day emotion, your day function. And you use them differently than you did before. And you are then a created being, as well as a being who is in a movement towards handling different states. The key in all of this is the beginning of becoming truly conscious of that flow operating in you, so you know it's really there. It's much easier in a kind of a way to become involved with extra perceptive orientations, because that's part of what we believe must happen. We must become extra special before we can become highly engaged with higher states. Don't have to be. It's not the reality of it. But our thinking, our mode of believing is related directly to that. If you do well, then you will be used for higher states. Draw your head back to, in a Christian modality, the disciples were not all college degree graduates. It hasn't got anything to do with your personalized version of what things have to be in relationship to belief. It has to do with your ability to engage with different states and still be able to function here on these planes. That is not a negative thing. Oh, well, one could say, well, then why bother doing college degrees and all, or university degrees and all the rest of it? Because what you're doing is preparing your system with your capacity to engage at the level where need is, depending on your interaction with life. Some have so much energy pouring through them, they can't concentrate. But energy is still pouring through them. You may meet them on the street, and they are begging on the street. Now, I have to say this. All beggars on the street are not higher beings. All people at highest levels are not all spiritual beings either. They are beings related to the focus that they are endeared with personally by the acts and engagements with life that they believe they needed to have. If they are engaged with higher states, the higher state engagement, I mean consciously involved with higher states, that is also there. If you're a tennis player, you can still have an engagement with higher states. If you're a garbage person, you can still have engagements with higher states. If you're a golfer, if you're a painter, you can still have engagements with higher states, although the golfing, I'm not sure. Just kidding. It doesn't matter. It does matter that individually you have decided to do this, that, or something else. And that is the regime, the area, the region where it is important for you to do what you do. As you grow, you will be working with a layer of engagement that relates to that area, perhaps. If you're really focused on that area. If you are in another area, you will work at that area. You'll do wherever, you will be wherever you are doing whatever you do. And that is wondrous from my point of view relative to higher states. Oh, here's one other thing. It's not a minor thing. It's a profound thing. My opinion. Remember, I'm a speaker. I talk about things the way I see them. It's important for you to think things through too. And to try to understand and perceive consciously the best you can. Agreement is not the purpose. Understanding relative to your internal workings is an important purpose. The need we have to engage with higher states is profoundly strong, as you probably understand. But the ideas we have about how and what should happen if these higher states are engaged with are relative to these planes. We do not understand what kind of an interaction these high planes on high states will have with people. It's possible that people engaged with more energy will be more self-interested, until they're not. Our growth is very slow. So if you're really interested in internal growth, do what you can inside of you. How that works out with other people will be based on them doing what is important to them inside of them. All you're trying to do is make a gap in there so that you can see better. You can learn about you so that you can know the difference between you and others, because transmission is an occurrence all the time. We transmit to each other always. And that truly is always on the table, from the lowest to the highest. And that is just a matter of engagement. You can't blame people for this or that kind of engagement, but they will engage the way they do, and so will you, until perhaps you can begin to understand that the need is great everywhere, not only in one place. Where it will occur and what will happen, no one knows. Or you could say the higher states may know a heck of a lot more than we do. But we have supposition. And supposition is only that. It's related to belief. Don't let your beliefs form your focal points. In other words, you continually engage with those higher states for a purpose that relates to the higher states. Otherwise, you're bending and focusing and judging and engaging the best you can, and you can only do that. But what you perceive to be of value may not be as valuable as you believe. Beliefs are in charge of us now. And that's a scary thing. But it's not good, bad, right, or wrong. It's what we do. Find a place where you can soften those structures down and broaden them out. And at this point, bring yourself back through all of those timelines into the form you have now, and realize that you're a very complex being, much more complex than you believe. And those karmic and reincarnation structures are there to help you relate it to the concept of energy more than judgment, from my perspective. Remember. But you must be okay with your perspective as well, and see if you can add anything to make it broader. The broader you get it, the more you'll know that since you've changed before, you will change again as different levels of energy engage with you. Be open to allowing your ideas to broaden beyond where you've settled and where you believe you have to remain. And you will be different than you were, and the past that affects you now will be different than what it was. And you will be more open to becoming more conscious to what higher states can offer mentally, emotionally, and physically. But you are also a part of the engagement with existence. You, the form who is thinking in some way right now, you're not going to remember your name, you're not going to, but a part of what you do now will be helpful to an interaction that you may have in another timeline for the purpose of being helpful somewhere through energetic engagement relating to higher states. I wish you all a very good evening and happy growing. Take care. Good night.